Coach, hey, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. It's great to have you back. Always appreciate you taking the time, and I know things have been crazy for you. I'm sure the move has been pretty chaotic unless you have that minimalist lifestyle where you save nothing, keep nothing, and so I am not that guy. So anyhow, thanks for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's just start with your old life. Tell me about the 2023 season, how you think it went. Yeah, we'll just start there.
Well, we got off to a really slow start. Had some growing pains for sure. And it was a very effortful coaching season. But once we got deeper into, say, October, something clicked with the guys where they started to understand the importance and urgency of the situation if we wanted to finish off the way that we always hope to. So one of the things that was funny is I didn't think our midfield defense was very good in the early part of the season. And in October, early November, we did 20 consecutive sessions with the same intro activity on doubling down on defense. And
that worked.
Suddenly they started thinking about it and doing it in games.
Yeah.
And so I think that created a big impact because, like, in the first 4 games of the NCAA tournament, we only allowed 1 goal. And I think that was greatly due to the team defense being much better because our midfielders and forward and everybody were paying attention to both sides of the ball much better than we had early in the season. And I think that's what allowed us to go as far as we did and sort of finish off as we did, is because something clicked in the guys that just got them on the same page and made sure they were understanding that, you got to be a full-time player on both sides of the ball. And once we started doing that, then we started looking really good. And so, we had a nice ride. And to be honest, PKs are a cruel way to end a season, but a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And, that's just the reality. But I was so proud of the guys for, coming back and pushing it there. But, quite honestly, to not let a team have a shot for the last 60 minutes of the game and still allow it to go to PKs, we just needed to put one in. And that's, that's what all the players say is, oh man, we just should have gotten one more.
I was, so I will just say, having watched that game, I was never comfortable. Like, I thought at 2, when you went up 2, I thought, oh, you would think you're in a good spot. And I thought, you can't rest. You can't sit back and rest on your laurels, right? Like, they're good enough. Amherst is good enough to bounce back. So,
well, they were up 2 on us.
Oh no.
So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. Yeah. I looked at that wrong. So, anyhow, so was it the defensive midfield that you thought was not? Was that where you thought the basics of your problem were for the first half of the season?
I'd say consistency overall in the first half of the season. I think some of the returning players were trying to be some of the graduated players as opposed to being themselves.
Yeah.
And they're very good players themselves, but we're trying to do stuff that they weren't accustomed to doing. And so we had to get them back into their own brains and realizing that we like them just as they are.
Yeah.
And then it was really, just the full play and some of the younger guys just getting to understand the grind of the college game. They're not used to so many games in such shorter time and the physicality and speed of play. And I think it took them some time to sort of catch up to it, if you will. So I'd say those are the things that sort of we had to iron out through the season. And
Yeah.
fortunately, which looking back, I can say we successfully
Yeah.
did.
Were you ever like? It's a weird question, but were you ever like worried? Like, was there a point like at the beginning of the season where you're like, something's not clicking? I'm very concerned about this, or were you pretty confident that if you did the right training, you got the right messages across, that they would come around? Or was there a point where you were like, this is going to be a tougher slog than I had hoped or anticipated?
We had some tough talks as a team, and it was at the beginning of the season, we were outplaying teams, but we weren't scoring. We missed many PKs in the first few games. Um, and that was all my upperclassmen missing PKs, who were the people who said they were great taking them and were comfortable. But it was just, I don't know, it was as if at times people just thought because they were wearing the uniform they were wearing and we've had good success in the past that we'd just be successful.
Yeah.
And getting them to understand the work that went into it. And, thankfully some of the upperclassmen spoke up in practices and started sharing some of their experience. And that I think was really helpful to everybody to understand, like, no, we've always outworked teams. It's always been part of us. It's, we're not stopping. Even if we're up, we're not stopping. And early in the year, we were up in a couple games, and then we let teams come back on us and tie us. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, this isn't what we do. And letting teams score because people are just turning off and not taking care of their defensive responsibilities. It was just a lot of that. And, it was just kind of growing pains in a way. We did graduate a lot.
Yeah.
And, but, I think it was a bit longer path than I expected to get him playing well. But I do know, like, that first game we had against Lynchburg in the regular season to end the regular season, I mean, we played great.
Yeah.
I mean, we just rolled in that game. And even their coach was like, we haven't been beaten like that in a long time. And I was just like, well, I hope we can do it in another game because it's the first game I've seen them actually fire on all cylinders.
Yeah. That game surprised me. Like, that was one of those games where you're like, man, there was such a disparity between you and. I thought Lynchburg was a good team, or is a good team, and I was, but I just thought, wow, that's when you guys could play, you played, right? Like, and that was it did seem to all gel together, which is interesting because then in the championship you ended up losing to them, right? Like, I mean, turnaround's fair play, but
yeah. Well, it was funny. It was like, as much as I think they were understanding they wanted to host the conference tournament, I think the way in which we won that end of the year game hurt their mentality going into the conference championship game.
I could totally see that.
I don't think they came in with the same focus and energy that would have been necessary. So, we took an L there, and thankfully pairwise hadn't been put in place yet, and we still got into the tournament.
I was going to ask you about that. That's funny. No, but it is interesting, right? Like, cause that game probably stung Lynchburg a lot more too, right? Like, on the one hand, you guys were played really well. You win the first game, and your guys are thinking, oh, we got this. Go to the championship, and you might be not as sharp. And meanwhile, Lynchburg is like, has you guys on a dartboard. They've been, like, stomping on you. They've been doing drills, imagining that this was drills against Washington and Lee, right? Like, I think that's the reality of sometimes those types of games that are quick turnarounds.
It's a very good rivalry always. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the NCAA tournament. Just your sort of, how do you think it flowed through? Where you guys are feeling good? I mean, obviously, you get to the semis, you you lose to in PKs to Amherst, but just the whole, the 5 games that you played beforehand. How was that? How was the feeling amongst the boys?
I'd say they were in great spirits, and to be honest, we had a lot of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, PJ Ryan didn't get to play the first weekend, and we were missing our starting 6 as well that first weekend, and so we had a lot of missing parts that first weekend. But I can't even tell you how proud I was of the guys who stepped up. We had to play with a different defensive line and a different starting midfield, and they just owned their roles.
Mm-hmm.
They were just so focused on doing exactly, like, I write very detailed scouting reports for every game and keys to us winning, and how we have to attack it and what specific people have to do and how we have to prevent the other team from doing X, Y, and Z. And I just thought that first weekend, like especially in that Oneonta game, I mean, their 2 outside midfielders or wingers are very good players. Mm-hmm. And, we had a makeshift back line, and between our outside backs and outside midfielders, those guys didn't get opportunities.
Yeah.
They didn't get the good scoring opportunities they could. And then, the goal they did get, it was funny because I had him on the scouting report and told our team not to let him take outside shots. And when that happened, one of my captains in the midfield turned. He's like, "Coach, that's my fault. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "All right, you know it."
Got to learn the hard way sometimes, right?
Yeah, but thankfully they buckled down and we got out of that one. And then I'll say, like, the next weekend was interesting. Tufts, strong team, strong program. And I knew it was going to be a close game. Mm-hmm. I knew it wasn't going to be like a high scoring game, mm-hmm. just the way the two teams played. And, it really came down to, that second half when our guys came out. I mean, they had a tough time handling our press. Mm-hmm. And for 25 minutes, they didn't get out of their half.
Yeah. And
I heard their players yelling to their coach, "Coach, what are we supposed to do? Yeah. How do we get out of this?" Yeah. And that's what I think got us the win, is they started doubting themselves and not doing some of the things that they traditionally have done. And our guys gained confidence during that whole time and started really sort of believing, like, oh, and once we got that goal, they were like, oh, we can definitely do this. Yeah. And so that's, kind of how momentum can sort of manage games sometimes. And I think it did manage that game. And, I thought, Tufts has some great players and a good coach, but they just, we're playing, what's the word? Harried, I guess.
Yeah.
They were just forcing it a bit too fast, not really creating great opportunities by hitting a lot of balls into the box and hoping they could get second balls and stuff. Yeah. And we got some good guys in the air and a good goalkeeper, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Because we're used to teams doing that against us. A lot of teams.
I'm sure you see that all the time, right? Or most of the time.
Yeah. And then that second day, that Colorado College team is a very good team. And I mean, that first half, we were not playing well at all. It was like, the fatigue factor and the hangover, if you will, from the previous win and stuff like that. But then in the second half again, we started taking it to them, and quite honestly, that's 3 or 4 really good scoring opportunities. Just didn't get it in. But the way we were playing in the second half and in overtime, I was much happier with. Again, they started doing exactly what we knew we needed to do, and in that situation, the PKs ended in our favor. Mm-hmm. So, they were excited and happy, and it was a long trip. But the guys were excited coming back and excited to go to, for most of them, their second Final Four in 3 years. So there was big excitement, and quite honestly, I will say, I give a huge shout out to the fans on that semifinal game. Yeah. That was the best environment I've ever seen at a Division III Final Four.
Really? Oh, interesting. Ever. Yeah. Well, you're down the road too, right? I mean, down the road. You're an hour away.
It's like like an hour away, but I'll tell you, even like Justin said the same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, "This is awesome,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, this is fun."
Yeah.
And next year it's in Vegas, and there'll be like 20 people in the
Oh
stands,
my
and it'll
God.
be very different.
I don't know. I don't understand that one, but the and it's such a great stadium. Like, if for folks who haven't been there, it is a great place for a soccer game. So I could only
Mhm.
imagine if the crowd is into it, and you got fans for both sides. Like, that would have just been, I mean, goosebump type games. Like, you walk out and be like, I can't believe I'm going to play in this place. Um,
Yeah, they were. I mean, that stand was completely packed,
yeah.
and the funniest thing is the security guards there were telling all the people standing up in front to sit down, and they kept just turning back to him saying no. And then some of my alums told me after the game, they're like, "Yeah, like we had like 100 of us lining up cheering, and he kept telling us to sit down." And I just turned to him and asked him at one point, like, "Really? How are you going to get that done?" And he's like, "I guess that's a good point." He's like, "So why don't you stop trying?"
He did his job, right? Checkbox job.
Yeah,
Like, I did my job. They didn't listen.
exactly.
That's that's
But
great. Hey,
but no, that crowd, I tell you, they helped us get that second goal
uh-huh.
because their reaction to that first goal was so spirited and
Yeah,
loud,
yeah,
and it just inspired our
yeah,
guys so strongly to keep the energy
yeah,
up and keep pressing and keep doing the things they were
yeah,
doing. And so I think they definitely were the 12th man in
yeah.
that at that event.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and like you said, now it's Vegas.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't even think, is there a Division 3 school in Nevada? I don't. I think it's one of the states that doesn't have one.
yeah. It's going to be at UNLV. Now, I will say 3 years ago, I mean, we're at UNC Charlotte, I
Uh
think,
huh.
or I think that's where it was. And that was a great venue.
Yeah,
Like it was a great venue for it.
yeah,
And, but it was just in a more populated
yeah,
area, a place that people could get to more easily. In Vegas, I just think that's the tough thing is it's not easy to get to
yeah,
Vegas for anyone in D3
yeah,
circles.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's,
And there's no
it's not
planning
close
you
to
can do.
anybody.
Like, I've never planned this before. How are we
Yeah.
supposed to do this? Yeah,
And then as a coach, that's like, fortunately, I've coached national teams where I've had them in other countries and everything.
yeah,
And I know how to take care of the
yeah,
distractions around.
yeah.
But that's going to be what every
Oh,
coach who
that's
gets
gonna
to
be,
Vegas has to do.
yeah,
They have
it's,
to look at all the
uh,
distractions and figure out, okay, well, how do we keep them
yeah.
focused? How do we keep them focused?
In Vegas, distractions? What? Like that? Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. Never heard of
yeah,
that
never
before.
heard of that before. That's fantastic. Um, hey, so let me ask you, you're you're now the head women's coach at Goucher. Can you
Hmm.
just tell me, and we'll talk a little bit more on the segment that we'll do with our Patreon, for the Patreon members that are part of the channel. Eh, you have experience coaching women's soccer before, but I'm just curious, has your mindset change at all in terms of how, again, sort of knowing where you were at with Washington and Lee and then going to Goucher, is there going to be a different way in which you're going to approach your new job versus your old job? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question, and quite honestly, no. Um, what I inherited at WNL, we needed a few years to get them to understand the commitment needed, the focus needed, the demands if they wanted to reach their goals. And so each year I installed a few more things to the strategy and a few more things to the tactics to
Mm-hmm.
improve our play, make it a bit more sophisticated each year and keep growing it. And then we got to the point where, the players started looking at it like, oh, it's not about winning our conference, it's about competing for a national title. And so there was like a stepwise
Yeah,
basis over the first 5 or 6 years there that got us to where we needed to
yeah,
be. And that might be, I might need a longer, I'll say, path at
Mm-hmm.
Goucher, because, Goucher is a little bit behind
Mm-hmm.
where WNL was at the time
Yeah.
when I took it over. But it's a very similar path.
Yeah.
It's, and it's different too. It's, I don't have the same expectations on the players that I've just inherited,
Mm-hmm.
because,
You can't.
you know, they
Yeah.
haven't competed for conference
Yeah.
titles. They don't know what it is
Yeah.
there. So it's more of an educated, it's more of a, all right, let's keep adding one step at a time, this and this and this and this, and do what we can. And, and that's like, I had to change the entire system of play at WNL, and I'm changing the entire system of play at Goucher.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, it's the same challenges when I look at it as a coach of, I was trying to figure out how to get the best of what I had at WNL for that first season.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the exact same thing at Goucher.
Yeah.
And, got to recruit some new players, and bring in people who sort of understand the style that we're wanting to play.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I say is, the last two stops I had after one full recruiting class, we won the conference title and we're in the NCAA tourney.
Mm-hmm.
So
Without
now I put pressure
pairwise.
on myself. Now I put pressure on myself, and I say, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta, uh, I gotta really put in a strong effort,
Yeah.
and see if I can make that three in a row. And if that's possible, I know everybody will be thrilled.
It has anything surprised you so far? I mean, were you that are you coming into a situation that your expectations were X and they turn out to be Y, or were you?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it was interesting because, as like, I've had some practices with the players, and we just had our competition date
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. Um, so really trying to figure out what we have and what potential we have,
Mm-hmm.
and the mentality of these players is awesome. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, every activity and every practice, they get better
Mm-hmm.
throughout the activity and get better. And in the games that we played yesterday, they got better every mini game that we played. So it's one of the things I talked with the players in the first practice we had is, we first went over the definition of insanity, which is, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And then we talked about being open-minded,
Yeah.
and understanding that, I'd sent them a survey questionnaire before we started working with them, and asked them what their goals are for themselves and for the team. And of the returners, it was all but two had said they wanted to be in the conference tournament. And 25% of those who said that said they wanted to win the conference tournament. Yet none of them have been in the conference tournament,
Mm-hmm.
nor won a conference tournament. So whereas I applaud the goals, I've been there. I know how to do that
Mm-hmm.
at multiple places.
Yeah.
And so that's where the open-mindedness comes in, is I can tell you what works. I can tell you what are the keys to getting there most efficiently. Um, and to be honest, like, I'm thrilled with just how they're listening and seeking information and wanting
Mm-hmm.
coaching, and their mentality is great. So it's just a matter of, can we get them to change their playing behavior enough to win more games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It, this is a dumb question, but it keeps popping. I mean, did you? Are they? They're obviously. I think they are, but are they hungry for? I don't know if this is the right way to say winning. Like, are they hungry? Like you said, 75% want to get to the conference tourney, 25% want to win it. Like, that might be a little, I don't know, premature, but like, to me, it just shows like there's an interest to get somewhere. Like, they're they're obviously not content with where they're at. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say they want to do better and they're hungry to do better. Um, I'm not someone who's big on words being representative of people, though. And so far, I'm happy. But I will say that, what they do over the summer, and if they stay on the fitness and injury prevention plan, and if they stay playing and continuing to study the formational doc that we send out and the demands of the system that we're trying to play, so they know it like the back of their hand, and they come in, and we have a foreign trip before our preseason, so that'll be a nice sort of time for us. But if they do that work that summer and I see people know that stuff and they're fit and they're technically sharp and tactically on the same page, then that answer will be readily seen. But right now, they're saying the right things. They're working hard in practices. They worked hard yesterday, and it just is. It's you can't play for 3.5, 4 months and expect to be a contender. You got to do more. And so that's kind of the adjustment that they have to look at in the summer and what they're each willing to do and how much of it they're willing to do to come back and go after such goals. So we'll see, once we come back in August, and then I'll have a clear answer for you. Yep, they definitely were motivated, or, well, some of them were, some of them weren't.
Yeah. Have you, have you had any like input? I mean, you literally, just for everyone watching, you started 2 weeks ago? I think is your official start 2-3 weeks ago.
2 weeks
2
ago.
weeks ago, yeah. I mean, have you had any input, say, into any recruiting that might be coming up for this fall, or is it pretty much it was already set and you just just going to do that and then start working on the next class?
No, I was down at the Girls Academy event in Greensboro
Mm-hmm.
just this past weekend, and I was looking at 24s,
Yeah.
trying to bring in another 2 or 3 24s that could be impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was on the transfer portal and reached out to a bunch of people there. And, it's, I've never been in a position before where I started this early.
Uh-huh.
So at both WNL and MIT, I started in July.
Yeah.
So
So you got
basically
plenty of time, man.
I met the team the first day of preseason.
Yeah.
So here I'm just like, oh, wait, okay. So if we can bring in a couple more, then I think that'll help us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm working hard to do right now, is see if I can find a way to sort of attract, because the way that FAFSA went this year, it really delayed the process for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more 24s still available than in typical years.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can convince a couple or a few to join us, and then that would be great. And then I'm really sure to, I went to so many 2025, 2026 games, and
just starting to build a pipeline, right? Like, just, hey, these are
trying to get the word out and gather talent.
Yeah. I mean, what's your thinking around are you gonna? I know at Washington and Lee, you had a strong roster, right? Like, you just had developed a strong roster that it was hard to sneak into the top 11, the starting 11, or starting, I'll just say 15, whatever those numbers are. But I mean, do you see a world in which you're bringing in these players and that they're having an immediate impact as freshmen, and as you continue to build out the classes in the future?
I hope so. Yeah. I hope, and it's funny. The first year at WNL, I didn't feel I had a clear 11 that I could play that I would feel comfortable with, and so we really did have to build and build our overall depth and talent, and then once we got there, build out specific positional depth as well. And I think that'll be very similar. Right now, I want to increase the overall talent level. And then hopefully we yield enough that, in a year or two, we can start to focus on positional needs and segmental needs of specific things we need to get better at, as opposed to, in general, just getting better overall.
Yeah. All right, Coach. So we're going to continue at this point over on the Patreon page for a few minutes, if so long as you're still good with time. But yeah, so for anybody who's watching, feel free to jump over to the Patreon page where we're going to have some time with Coach Singleton and talk about Goucher, and maybe we'll talk about the NCAA pairwise that would have apparently excluded Washington and Lee last year, the national semifinalist. So anyhow, here we go.